17 years of my endeavor, sweat and life given to a single company. I worked tirelessly to stand out among the rest. I've given my all for the company's prosperity, and in return for my efforts, the company has rewarded me with a pink slip. The official reason was downsizing, but unofficially, it was their way of telling me I've become too expensive for hire. After all, why pay a 40-year-old twice the money they would pay a fresh college graduate for the same job? It doesn't matter that I've worked overtime without pay for nearly 20 years. They don't care that I've trained dozens of new hires over the years. All they care about is the bottom line. And that's how I ended up working at an outpost in Gangwon province near the Taebaek Mountains. The pay was surprisingly good. Don't get me wrong, it doesn't compare to what I used to make, but my 2 daughters will soon be enrolling in college, and I have to continue saving as much as I can for them. I work on a private estate. A big chunk of the land here is owned by a multimillionaire, and for some reason, the owner has 9 outposts surrounding his estate. So I'm one of the 9 people who constantly patrol his property. I didn't understand it then, and I still don't understand it today, why the owner has got people watching over his land. I say that because there's nothing here. He doesn't cultivate his land, there's no livestock, and the only buildings intact are the outposts that the guards live in. Yeah, I guess I didn't mention that part. This is a year-round job, and we only get to go home 6 times a year. Basically, my full-time home is my outpost, and this served me well for the past 2 years. It gets lonely at times, and I sure miss my family, but there's a certain serenity about being so far away from the bright lights of the city. We're not supposed to, but sometimes the guards radio ahead before a patrol, sync the departure time, and meet up at the halfway point to chat, drink, and pass the boredom of the nightly patrol. One night, I had prepared a bottle of soju and some snacks to share with Lee, a fellow guard and new friend I had made there. We were of the same age and had similar life experiences, so we really bonded very quickly. I left the outpost at 1 a.m., therefore Lee and I would have crossed paths at around 2. From about 1:45 or 50, I began seeing streaks of lights in the distance. At first, I thought it must be Lee's flashlight, but soon realized it couldn't be because the streaking light was red in color instead of the white LED beam. Something like that would have scared me to death back in the days, but once you spend 2 years in an empty field, constantly hearing and seeing weird things, it takes a lot more than some strange lights to faze you. I kept walking, thinking that it's probably the trick of the eye. Perhaps they're lights from afar, or maybe Lee's carrying a red flashlight for the hell of it. I just didn't think too much of it. In any event, I walked a few more minutes and could see Lee standing in the middle of the field, but I could only see his back. Normally, when he arrives there first, he points the flashlight toward the direction I'm coming from so I can see his location clearly. It was definitely weird, especially because he wasn't moving at all. It was winter and naturally very cold. When we go outside in the winter times, we are always moving, trying to get warm, and so seeing him so still was eerily strange. I walked up to him, stood right behind, and tapped on his shoulder as I said, "Lee, I'm here." He didn't move at all, so I speak louder, "Hey, I'm here." But nothing, so I go around him to see him face to face, then fell on my ass upon seeing his face. His eyes were wide open, tears were falling, and he was unresponsive. I held his shoulders and shook him to wake him up from whatever nightmare he was stuck in. I shouted and slapped his cheek, but nothing happened. I tried to walk him toward my outpost, and fortunately, he took the steps when I guided him forward. We must have walked for less than 5 minutes when I began hearing a woman's laughter. The sound level shifted constantly, One moment, I could hear the laughter right next to me, and the very next moment, the sound came from what it seemed like some 10 meters away. I knew we weren't dealing with a human. It had to be supernatural. I continued going forward as I repeated to myself in my head, even when the spirit has a hold of you, all you've got to do is to keep a clear head and you'll survive. My grandpa used to say this old saying to me after he'd tell me some scary stories before bedtime. Lee is fully incapacitated, and therefore if the same thing happened to me right at that moment, we would both freeze to death before sunrise. The streaks of light blurred my vision. The terrifying laughter had impaired my hearing. I wanted to leave Lee and run for my life, but something inside of me kept me going, and I had finally arrived at the outpost. I got inside, called the ambulance, and waited until help would arrive. The laughter and the lights disappeared only when the ambulance got close enough for me to hear the siren and also see the light in the distance. Lee was taken to the hospital right away, and I rode in the ambulance with him, not only as his guardian, but really because I was scared out of my wits. Lee stayed in that vegetative state for as long as I kept in touch with his family. That was maybe 3 or 4 months ago, and we haven't spoken since. As insane as it may sound, I still work the same job. I can't get another that pays better, and my family needs the money. It's kinda sad when I think about it, but that's what fathers do, make sacrifices so his children and wife don't have to. I haven't seen the ghost since the last encounter. I need this job for at least another 5 years. I really hope I'll still be around by the time both my daughters graduate college, and hopefully I'll even get to walk them down the aisle. 8 a.m. in the morning in a packed train. Like any other weekdays, I'm headed to work. I'm bored. I forgot to bring my earphones. I look at the faces of others to pass the time, just briefly one by one so I don't make anyone feel uncomfortable. Everyone's on their phones or just staring into the abyss to avoid eye contact with others in the train. But then there's one woman at the far end of the train who looks in my direction. Actually, I think she's looking straight at me. Everyone moves a little as the train moves, or at the very least when it comes to a stop, but the woman is like a freaking statue that's glued to the floor. I don't know why, but she looks so funny. I look toward her and laugh, but quickly try to refrain as not to offend her. I get off the train at 8:30 a.m. and slowly walk toward the office with plenty of time to spare before work begins at 9. I get to the corner and the light changes to red. I wait like everyone else, and that's when I notice the woman from the train standing at the opposite end of the crosswalk. I guess I did walk slowly, seeing as how she went somewhere else and was already coming back. It's strange though. Why the heck is she staring at me again? The light changes to green, and I follow the flow of the pedestrians to cross the street. The woman walks from the opposite direction as we get closer and closer. By the time we're almost right next to each other, she turns her head in my direction and says, "You see me?" I'm like, what the hell just happened? You see me? Of course I see you, bitch. Crazy bitch, I'm thinking, and just go to work without giving it a second thought. Work comes to an end at 6 p.m., but of course my ass-faced boss refuses to go home. It's like a loop of douchebaggery. My boss refuses to go home because his boss refuses to push his ass off the chair, and obviously his boss's boss is doing the same crap. It's nothing new in Japan. They work you like a dog, pay you shit, give you walking papers before you even hit 40. Your wife leaves you since you no longer serve as a money-making machine. Your children are ashamed of you, and in the end, you either end up living in a PC cafe or hang yourself to end the suffering. But anyhow, I leave work almost at 10 p.m., get off the train back home at 10:40, and now I've got 10 minutes of walk to get home. I drop by the convenience store to grab some snacks, and for a split of a second, I see the crazy woman from earlier in the day standing right outside the store. Am I too tired? I think I'm seeing things. I pay for my stuff and get out of the store. A few minutes later, I'm right outside of my apartment. I feel relieved to finally get some rest, but then I see the crazy woman again. I walk up to her and say, "What do you want? Why do you keep following me?" The woman comes right up to my face and says, "You see me?" I run into the lobby and head straight to the stairs. The thought of riding the elevator didn't even cross my mind, and I ran faster than I ever have in my life. Soon after, I was inside my apartment, and my wife kept asking me why I was acting so weirdly. I just told her, "Leave me alone, I'll tell you later. Just let me be for now." The reason why the crazy woman scared me so much was because I couldn't feel her breath. She came right up to my face and spoke, but somehow only the words traveled in the air and not the breath out of her mouth. I had only one explanation for that, and it was really hard to accept that as a reality, but I had to. The reason being, I still see her every day, but no one else does. She tries to get my attention, but I no longer acknowledge her. I pass through her like she's not there, and ignore her sayings as if she's a mute. It doesn't get much easier with experience, but I think this is the only way to prevent things from escalating. If I give her an inch, then she'll push closer 2 inches. I don't want to know what happens next, and so I continue ignoring her saying, "You see me." My parents were separated when I was 12 years old, and I was raised by my mother once the divorce was finalized in the same year. Dad left everything for Mom and I, the apartment, the car, and over 90% of our savings when he left. He chose to live in the countryside, at least that's where he considered his place was located, but in reality it was more like in the middle of the woods. He made his money by searching for rare medicinal roots in the woods, and once he got pretty good at it, he actually made more than he did working as a car salesman. He would come home to see me a few times a year, and every time he stopped by, he'd give Mom a stack of cash. Mom worked as a nurse, and so we would have made an okay living on our own, but thanks to Dad doing his part, money-wise we were always well off. At some point, he was making such good money that I didn't understand why he would continue staying at his crappy cabin in the woods. In any event, I graduated college some years later, and Dad of course came by to congratulate me. Mom, Dad, and I had dinner together, then afterward, Mom left first so I could spend some time alone with Dad. We drank together, had a long conversation, and before going back home, Dad told me I should come see him at his place before I found a job and got too busy to come see him in his natural habitat. I agreed because for one, I've been there only once, and secondly, I wanted to spend some time somewhere peaceful and quiet before I began the rat race in the concrete jungle. 2 days later, I was on the road, driving my very first car, which was given to me as a gift from Dad. After 8 hours of tedious drive, I took an exit, then made a few turns, and ended up on a dirt road leading to Dad's place. I left Seoul at 6 a.m., and by the time I arrived at Dad's place, it was only 4 p.m., but it was already fairly dark. I don't know if it has something to do with the lack of ambient light, or if it's because we're in the middle of the woods, but it definitely took me by surprise. Anyway, Dad wasn't home when I got there. I called for him, but he didn't answer, and so I went off in search of him. I didn't go too far because the last thing I wanted was to get lost. I kept a view of the house at all times and went around in circle to look for him. It may have been about 10 minutes later when I had found him. I was going to shout, "Dad," but then I saw him talking to someone. Or at least that's how it looked, because he was looking in one direction and talking, but the problem being, there was no one next to him or anywhere near him. He was just talking to the air. I walked closer to him, and when I was only a few meters away, I said, "Dad, who are you talking to?" He turned around with a big smile and said, "Oh, there you are. Nothing. I wasn't talking to anyone." This is the sort of thing you do when you live alone for so long. You find ways to have conversations on your own because there's no one to talk to. Well, you won't have to do that for at least a few days. I'm here. We went back to his place, had a nice traditional Korean dinner. Yeah, Dad had become quite the cook over the years. Then went to bed early at around 9. I woke up at 3:20 in the morning due to my bladders expanding to the point of imminent rupture. Dad wasn't in the room, but I could hear him talking to someone outside in the yard. I took a peek through the door and saw him talking to the air again. These are the words I overheard. "My son's here, so don't bother me for a few days. You keep this up and I'll never talk to you again. That message you wanted me to send to your wife, it ain't happening if you continue to pester me. Am I making myself clear?" Then he turned around and returned to the room. I pretended to be asleep and held a piss for the next 3 hours. I didn't know if I should speak to him about what I saw or if I should just ignore it. On top of that, it wasn't like I was going out there after what I just saw. Chances are my dad had a few screws loosened up, living out here all alone, but the thought of spirits also crossed my mind. I woke up the next morning and the first thing that I did was to empty my bladders. After that, I saw a note that was left for me from Dad. On it, he said that he had prepared breakfast for me and that he would come back in the afternoon. When he returned home later that day, the first thing he said to me was, "I heard you saw me last night." It took a few seconds for me to process what he had said, but soon after I responded, "Yeah, I did. I didn't want you to know that I had seen you talk to yourself again because it's not like you're crazy. Look, I get it. I probably wouldn't be much different if I lived here all alone for over 10 years. But hey, how did you know?" "I didn't. Someone told me that you saw me. I had my back faced in your direction, but the spirit I was talking to had a clear look at you." I just stood there thinking, oh my god, my poor dad. He's really gone insane. What the hell are we going to do with you? That's when he sat me down and said, "I know you don't believe me, but how else can you explain my knowledge of you getting up in the middle of the night and taking a peek through the door? Son, how do you think I find so many old and rare roots that can sometimes be sold at the price of a new car? I have my sources. I help out the wandering spirits by sending letters to their families containing messages that the spirits never had the chance to pass along to their loved ones. In return, the spirits tell me the locations of the roots. I'm able to make money and support both you and your mother. It's kind of a transaction I came up with over the years." He then explained to me that he could see and speak to spirits ever since he can remember. He tried to live a normal life, get married, have kids, go to work and all that, but at some point, it just became too hard for him to ignore all the pleas for help from the spirits. That's why he and Mom got divorced. It wasn't because he stopped loving her. Mom learned about it too only a few years after they got married, and I guess that's why she never said one bad thing about him. He told me that he had to leave Seoul because big cities have so many wandering souls. For him, living in Seoul was like being stuck in a box with full of talking mouths, constantly pestering him for help. He was waiting for the right time to tell me. He wanted me to know that he left because he had no other choice, and that it wasn't because he didn't love me or Mom. But there was a darker purpose to the visit as well. The problem was that the gift ran in the family. It was like a crapshoot, so if you were unlucky, you got it. And although I don't have the gift right now, he told me that there are family members who've gained the ability in their 30s and 40s, so until it's all said and done, there's always a chance that I might have to live like that. That's why he called me out here, to inform me of my potential gain of unwanted gift, and as well as how to deal with that once I got it, or rather if I got it. I'm 27 years old today, and luckily, I'm still in the clear. I do, however, still live with the fear of waking up one day and start seeing and hearing dead people. I hope it never comes to that, but if it ever happens, I guess I still have the solace of knowing it won't be the end of everything. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the end of this video, but I would sincerely ask you to stick around for about 5 minutes to listen to what I have to say about keeping this channel alive. So what I said on the last video about running multiple advertisements per video is so far proving to be true. I haven't had the heart to add the mid-roll ads in the new video, and the one before that, I've added a mid-roll ad only after more than 1,200 of you have already watched it. I just hate the thought of putting you guys through multiple ads. However, I have added the mid-roll ads in many of my older videos a little over a week ago, and I'm already seeing the difference in overall views, subscriber gains per day, and so. The numbers should be monitored for at least 7 weeks, but so far, mine and many other YouTubers' hypotheses about the new YouTube changes are proving to be true. So allow me to give you a quick briefing on the changes that's been taking place on YouTube in the last 3 years. One is the onslaught of the mainstream media and YouTube's ambition to promote those dinosaurs such as NBC, CNBC, ABC, CBC, A&E, and so. Two is the same type of onslaught by the large and medium-sized production studios such as Paramount, Warner Bros, BuzzFeed, Sony, and you get the picture. There are likely many reasons why these changes are taking place, but I believe first and foremost, YouTube wants to legitimize itself and is completely ignoring the independent creators who made YouTube what it is today. They're also putting more emphasis on watch times, and there are 2 ways to increase that. One, as a content creator, you can make your videos longer, or 2, you can upload multiple short videos every day. The thing is though, independent creators don't have the kind of resources to upload every day. Every single one of those big time YouTube creators who've started out small, they now all have a full complement of production staff to allow them to publish as often as they do. And they do that, of course, not only to up their content quality, but also because if they don't, they can compete with the likes of NBC, BuzzFeed, and such. The last change that's been coming and going is the like and comment. YouTube has been all over the place with this, but lately they've been putting lots of weight on the algorithm on how the videos and channels are prioritized based on these 2 factors. So that's a very simplified, bare-bones version of the recent changes, and this is where you come in. I'm not gonna tell you what to do, that's up to you. However, I will apprise you of the only way the smaller channels run by independent creators can compete, and you can decide with your influence as a viewer which channels will get on X and which will continue to exist. The very first thing is to make sure you click on the little bell thingamajiggy right next to the subscribe button and tick the option to be notified of all contents uploaded by YouTube channel of your choice. This makes me so sad, the fact that YouTube makes you jump through hoops to get your contents across to folks who are already subscribed to you. They basically erase your hard work with a single algorithm change. But moving on, many YouTubers have already tested this, and currently as it stands, the likes and comments are a huge deal on YouTube. I'm not only talking about my channel, but if you're subscribed to any other small channels that you personally wish for them to continue existing, then don't be stingy with the like button and comment on those videos. Lastly, I think you should consider supporting the smaller channels by at least pausing your ad block when you're watching contents from independent creators. It goes a long way for folks who depend on YouTube income to make a living. I imagine if my boss only paid me 60% of what I get paid now, I know that's going to bring about huge changes on how I go about my daily life and also how I plan for the future. To sum it up, regardless of how much you support the independent creators going forward, hundreds if not thousands of them will go out of business in the next 12 months. You won't notice it a whole lot because those channels are tiny like mine, but if you pay close attention, then you will see a lot of small channels with quality contents slowly fading out. But a handful of them, at least a sizable percentage, can be saved if you as a viewer use your influence to help those channels to stay afloat. YouTube is where I get 90% of entertainment on a day-to-day basis, and I'm sure it isn't too different for all of you. The death of independent creators will mean that YouTube will ultimately look not much different from all the mainstream media that we have gotten sick and tired of. Right now, as things stand, there is no alternative to YouTube. Vimeo, Dailymotion, Minds.com, none of these can compete with YouTube. The ball is in your court. How much YouTube changes in the next few years and how many independent creators get to survive those changes will depend on how you spend your influence as a viewer. Make your voices heard with your watch time, likes, comments, shares, and so. We'll do our part by continuing to publish quality content, and when the dust is settled, we'll see if my channel, along with hundreds of other smaller channels, are still standing. Thank you for your time. I'll see you on the next one. Goodbye.